Here we are, week 3, right? It's time to continue our journey to wellness. And one of the things that I want to focus on for this week is how we deal with addiction and food addiction. One of the struggles that most of us face as overweight people or people who are trying to deal with our weight is figuring out, are we addicted to food? I would like to focus on this woman for just a moment. This is Bitten Jonsson. She is a registered nurse. She's also an addict that would tell you she's in recovery from both alcohol addiction as well as food and sugar addiction. And she is a specialist, right? She absolutely specializes in this. And so the majority of the material that I'm going to be presenting to you this week comes from her incredible work, many YouTube videos and lessons that I've done, but she also has a website that you can contact her directly and communicate with her program. I'd like to say up front, anything that is incorrect on this slideshow is completely mine and has nothing to do with Bitten. She does not know I am creating this document. So, harmful use and addiction, right? There are really 3 types of relationships that we have with different substances. Psychoactive substances, substances that trigger in our brain. Different people experience different things very differently. So for instance, alcohol. I want you to think about alcohol and your relationship with it. Personally, I have absolutely no relationship with alcohol. I don't drink at all. I've drank. I don't like it. I don't really care for it. If I have a drink, I never think about drinking again, right? So we call this social use. When you're exposed to the substance, you can take it or leave it. It doesn't matter to you one little bit, right? For some people, I love when people tell me, oh, everything in moderation. You can try everything. Every night I have one small square of dark chocolate and I'm completely satisfied. My sweet tooth is covered. Well, that is wonderful, right? That is wonderful. And I have no doubt that that is true for many people. But for me, that is not the case. I am not a social user when it comes to sugars and processed foods. The next step is something called harmful use. And when Bitten talks about this, harmful use is when you tend to use food to soothe yourself or because you don't know what's best. You eat the wrong things, you eat a lot of processed foods, or maybe you're too busy, you're too whatever. And it can really lead to those lifelong health concerns. And while you know it can lead to being unhealthy, while you know it can be you can be obese, you could technically stop it. It's not like one bite and you're hooked, okay? And so when you first see someone who's a harmful user, you may actually wonder, are they addicted? And I know personally, as I was listening to Bitten talk and as I was learning more about food addiction, I don't know whether I'm a harmful user or whether I'm truly an addict. And it's only taken some work to determine that maybe I really have some addiction issues. But it may look a lot like an addiction. So now if you are a pathological user, right? If you're a pathological user, then you're someone who has an obsession or a lack of control when it comes to food, right? So if you start eating, for some people, unfortunately, this might look like a really weird binge. I remember one time I wanted to eat a treat and I didn't want to share it with my husband. He loves anything I have at home. It tends to disappear. And I wanted it for myself. And so I found myself in my car eating this candy that I had bought for myself. And then when I got home, I hid the wrappers because I didn't want him to ask me, well, where's mine? And I didn't want to confront the issue of me wanting something that was for me and at the same time knowing it probably wasn't healthy, right? And so I'm hiding and sneaking. And those kinds of things are not good signs, right? Those are signs that maybe there's something a little bit more wrong. And so this obsession, this loss of control is considered a pathological use. Often is diagnosed with surveys and experienced professionals. So Bitten has something called a sugar profile, and she will have you answer some questions. And you can go to her website and you can look into it. There's also a really quick one where you answer like 6 questions. And if you have 2 or more of them, then you might need a deeper evaluation to see if you're an addict or if you're a harmful user. So as you're deciding what you fit in, it's a good idea to understand what addiction actually looks like, why it's happening in our bodies, because many of us have some kind of addiction that might even lead into something called a process addiction, where we start to volume eat, where we start to sneak and different things. So let's just talk about it. So addiction in and of itself is a primary illness. It is not caused because of something else. So my diabetes was caused because of insulin resistance and caused because of excess carbohydrates. It was not my primary illness, right? Addiction is a primary illness that leads to other behaviors. It is not that other behaviors lead to the addiction first. So it's chronic, it's progressive, but it's treatable, right? All addictions are chronic and progressive. So if you know someone who struggles with addiction to a substance that's much more destructive than sugar typically is seen to be, if you know someone who's addicted to crack cocaine, or if you know somebody who's addicted to alcohol, you know how destructive that can be in their lifestyle. And so a lot of us don't think of food as potentially addictive because it doesn't take my house, right? Like I'm not buying enough chocolate that I can't pay my car payment. And so a lot of us don't think of food as a potential illness. And the reality is we can't cure the biology and the things that have changed in our brain, but we can treat it, right? And the only way to treat any addiction is full scale abstinence. If you tell an alcoholic they need to have one drink a day, they're not going to make it. They're going to fall off the wagon and they're going to binge. And so when we have this calories out group saying carbs are okay and anybody can have anything in moderation, that's wonderful for people who are social users. But most of us at this point who are on this video are either harmful users or we're truly addicted to things. And so let's kind of talk about what we need to do. I love this statement from Bitten. I think it's great. One bite is too much and 1,000 is never enough, right? One bite of a Reese's cup and I'm in trouble. I love those. I told myself when I made the decision and realized that this was a problem for me that I just really can't have them again. And I absolutely love them. And that little voice comes back every once in a while. It's like, oh, but just one, just one. And I know better because 1,000 is never enough. So when you ask someone who's a true, genuine addict why they're doing something, why are they doing that behavior, it's not going to help them, right? That's why my therapy sessions with my counselor were not helping me fix things, because I was asking, why am I doing this? Am I sabotaging? And it really was that there was some biological stuff going on. So we have to treat the brain and the physical addiction first. It has to be the first thing we do. We have to get real healing of brain pathways in order to go into remission and recovery processes. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain in this unit, and I apologize if I get a little sciencey on you. I tend to do that as I am a science teacher. It's the way I am wired. So let's talk about the limbic system of your brain. Your limbic system is the inner portion of your brain that, if you look evolutionarily, it's the least developed portion of our brain. That's why some people call it the reptilian brain, because reptiles actually have a brain that functions a lot like this. It's where all your instinctive brain activities occur, like eating, your fight, flight, freeze, right? Like when you're in the middle of a crisis, you don't choose that. That's right there. It's just instinct. Reproduction, the drive to reproduce. The limbic system of your brain does not have the ability to produce language, though. It doesn't have that complex process. You are wired with a limbic system at birth. And so these instinctive behaviors are there to try to keep you alive. It's very primitive, it's very simple, and it's all survival based, right? It's the things that are going to be like you're eating, you're drinking, you're breathing, you're hunting. And so those are very simple. The thing is your limbic brain, your reptilian brain does not learn from its mistakes. So if you do something wrong, it's not like all of a sudden, oh, I got sick from that. That's not the part of your brain that grows. Unfortunately, addiction actually will trigger this region of the brain and makes your brain wired to be more survival based and thinking that certain foods, such as sugars, are going to be helpful for survival, right? And so your brain is just wired. And then when you ask somebody, why are they doing that? They can't tell you, because that region of their brain has no language. The other region of your brain is your prefrontal cortex. It's all centered right here in the front part, that frontal lobe. If you look at every other organism on the planet, there's only a few that actually have a very developed prefrontal cortex like we do. And so this is where your higher order thinking region takes place. So you're going to have your strategic thinking, your risk evaluation. Is it worth it? Right? So I've learned it's not worth it for me to eat a Reese's peanut butter cup. Self-discipline, this is where I choose to get up at 4:45 in the morning and take my walks. Your ability to plan, you're making decisions, all of that happens in your prefrontal cortex. It understands consequences for its actions. It's not there to survive, it's there to really process. It has your impulse control regions, but it can be easily bored, which is why some of us do some risky behaviors, because that risk evaluation, it's like, well, maybe it's not that risky, and so it gets bored sometimes. It will, if you are addicted, if you are building the reptilian brain, it will actually develop slower as you're a child, and it will work slower. Like it literally processes slower when you're in the drug of choice. So if that's sugar or processed foods, then that's the region of your brain that struggles. Okay. So addiction prevents these high level thoughts. And so the more addicted you are, the less likely you are to think your way out of a situation. I also want to focus on two hormones as part of your brain system. The first one I want to talk about is dopamine. Dopamine is one you've probably heard of before. It's the feel-good hormone. It's that part of your brain that is wired into your reward center, and it gives you a feeling of pleasure when you do something you like or when you experience or taste something. And it triggers your motivation to get more of it. So it's a really useful hormone when it comes to like goal setting and reaching things. So like as my scale was continuing to drop, it made me excited and I could feel the pleasure of that, which allowed me to set more goals to keep me going, which is why some people use the scale or numbers to help them in their journey on weight loss. It's the one that triggers that motivation to keep you alive. It evolved for survival. It wanted to encourage things like you need to eat. And back in the day, food was hard to find, right? If you think about it, I mean, just 20,000 years ago, we would have to hunt or we would have to farm or whatever. And that's a lot of work. And so if we weren't motivated by some kind of pleasure, we wouldn't do it. And eating brought us the pleasure. Drinking, reproducing, all those things are part of what happens when your dopamine is triggered. There's more to it than that, but that's part of it. So when you release dopamine in your brain does something called down regulation. So if you have more dopamine on a regular basis, your brain is like, whoo, too much pleasure, too much, too much, too much. I need to slow that down. And sometimes it'll down regulate and stop functioning receptors in your brain. And it'll actually make that high of your dopamine less. And that's why you've heard about people who take a drug and then they had to take more and more. The research shows that like 1/3 of people who try cocaine for the first time are immediately addicted, right? They're immediately addicted because their brain is already, I need more, I need more, I need more. And that's where your dopamine centers come in. And so it makes you less sensitive, so you'd need more. And that's why they talk about things like marijuana or whatever being a gateway drug. Well, sugar is actually kind of a gateway drug for a lot of people to things like alcohol, and even potentially smoking cigarettes, because when you start, you're very young. Most of us give children sugar at a very young age, starting to wire those pathways in their brains to the reward center. Sugar triggers dopamine like almost nothing else does. It just fires your brain, and I'll show you a scan in a minute. And so when that fires, your body is like, ooh, so much sugar, and it starts to downregulate and downregulate and downregulate. So sugar, specifically fructose and sucrose, sucrose is table sugar and fructose is the one found in fruit. They really trigger these dopamine regions. And if you keep triggering it on a regular basis every day with sugar, or some of you who are sugaraholics, you're actually going to downregulate. So what does that mean? What are the symptoms of you when you don't feel like you've got enough dopamine to even actually feel normal? So low dopamine levels will make you feel tired, unmotivated, and fatigued. Remember, dopamine hit makes you want to go hunt, makes you want to go do those things in order to survive. Well, if you have low dopamine, then you're like, I don't really care. Okay. It can lead to memory loss. It can make things not wire properly in your brain. It can give people mood swings. We've all seen the commercials like, you're not yourself when you're hungry, right? And they give them a Snickers at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon and they go from one person to another. We've seen the commercial. Well, that's the truth. If you're a carb burner and your sugars are going up and down and up and down and up and down, you might actually get cranky and, hangry, as they say. It can lead to poor sleep when your dopamine levels are low. These are all biological symptoms. So I want you to look at this picture, okay? So on the left, you see a picture of the normal brain. And the normal brain this is a functional MRI. I think it's a PET scan, actually. When the brain is just on a normal functioning brain. And that red means higher activity. And you notice it's in the middle. That's the limbic region, right? That's that center where your dopamine fires from. A cocaine user is less hot. There's less red. That means that their dopamine has down regulated, right? It is less regulated, which means they're producing less, which means they need more, which makes them addictive. Look at the sugar user. It's even less, right? That's where the statement that Oreo cookies are more addictive than cocaine is actually true. They did a rat study. I know it's rats and not people, but it's similar. They did a rat study where they gave them sugar water and cocaine water, and the rats preferred sugar water over the cocaine completely. They would much rather have regular sugar water than they would cocaine because of the way it worked in their brains. So I want to talk about one other hormone that's a good hormone that we want to focus on too. Serotonin is another mood regulating hormone. It's another good one for us. It leads to happiness, contentment, serenity. It's like, for me, like when I'm sitting at the beach with my feet in the sand and my friends all around me, I feel the serotonin, right? That moment. So serotonin is going to be one that helps you feel emotionally stable. Now, serotonin has a ton of actions in the body, but this is what it does to your brain. This is how your brain reacts to it. In low levels, lack of serotonin can lead to depression and other mood disorders such as anxiety. If you would take an SSRI for antidepressant or anti-anxiety, these are serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They prevent you from taking your serotonin and getting rid of it. Like they're there to actually help regulate your serotonin levels in your brain. 90% of your serotonin is actually not produced in your brain. It's produced in your gut, in the lining of your gut. So if you have an unhealthy gut system, if you have some disorder there, it can actually affect your serotonin levels, which really can cause mood problems. So your healthy gut is going to produce more serotonin. So we want to really have a healthy gut. And we talk about gut microbiome, but we want to talk about not having leaky gut and things like that. Leaky gut is actually caused mainly by excess fructose in our diet. High fructose corn syrup is really, 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 really horrible for your intestines. If you want to know more about that, Dr. Robert Lustig, Lustig, has great studies on that. It's made from an amino acid called tryptophan. Tryptophan is one of the 20 different kinds of amino acids found in protein. So high levels of protein actually give you enough tryptophan. It's also that hormone that we joke about that's found in turkey that everybody's like, oh, it makes you sleepy at Thanksgiving. No, the reason you're sleepy at Thanksgiving is because you ate so much food, your blood is flowing to your intestines. You don't need enough tryptophan in order to stop that. So with the tryptophan, you need those good chemicals. So how do we actually increase our serotonin? How do we improve the amount of serotonin in our body? Well, one, we want to eat more tryptophan, right? So if we eat foods high in tryptophan, we're going to have salmon, eggs, turkey, cheese, and all kinds of proteins. But those things are, to name a few. If you're a vegetarian, you can get some nuts and seeds. Personally, I don't eat those, but some of those will actually be there. So you can look those things up online. You want to increase your exposure to sunlight. There's a lot of research on how just being out in the sun can actually cause your serotonin levels to increase, even in your gut, not just your brain. Exercises like walking. A lot of people discount walking as an exercise, but it's a wonderful exercise for most of us, and it actually helps increase this. We need to work on reducing our stress levels. And we're going to, again, talk about that in another video, but stress management is a huge part of success and health. So boosting it, regular exercise, that mindfulness, meditation, good sleep hygiene, right? You got to get a good night's sleep. We talk about that all the time. Diet, you can take some supplements. I don't recommend supplements most of the time if you can get a diet that's really rich in healthy foods. Light therapy, just being out in the sun, and then doing enjoyable things, right? Doing things that your body likes, that your mind likes. So how do we rewire our brain? How do we upregulate our dopamine and increase the production of our serotonin to make our brain work better, especially if we have an addicted brain, right? If we have one that's been attacked by sugar for so long. So I love the way Bitten says this. It says you can't think your way to better actions. You have to act your way to better thinking. So you have to do biological things, physical things to your body in order to allow your brain to start to heal. Okay, we need to increase our serotonin, which is going to be a good healthy hormone, and re-engage our healthy normal dopamine responses. We want them to be doing what they're supposed to be doing, not being triggered every time we eat a cookie. So how do we increase this, right? We just talked about this. We want to have physical activity. We want to do meditation, stress management. Want exposure to sunlight. There's a lot of research on going out early in the morning when the sun is coming up. It helps your circadian rhythms, especially early morning light in your actual eyes, not through sunglasses. Sunglasses actually stop some of the healthy rays that actually trigger our brains to function properly. We want to do some engaging hobbies, which is where we get our time. Maybe it's sewing, maybe it's riding a bike, maybe it's reading a book, something that's entertaining for you, that's relaxing. It takes the addicted brain anywhere from 12 to 24 months to actually physically rewire with new habits, right? So when you change your habits and you start healing in your healthy nutrition, your damaged pathways take a long time to heal. And so one of the things that I think is kind of crazy to me is like when I first heard this, I was probably a month into my journey and I was like terrified. I'm like, 2 years? How am I ever going to do this for 2 years? Well, I'm a year in, and I'm a lot further along than I ever thought I would be. So I'm doing it one day at a time, right? If you reintroduce your drug, you can quickly destroy all the progress because it re-triggers the dopamine centers in your brain. And so abstinence is the key. And I hate to say that. I hate to tell you that, you just never can. But when you look at an alcoholic and you say, no, you can never have a social drink again, the reality is none of us think that's weird. That just makes sense. So if sugar is a real problem for you or processed grains, you just have to stay away from it because your brain and your body deserve better. So Bitten talks about the red dog versus the blue dog. So the blue dog is the normal functioning precortex part of your brain, right? That's that part of your brain that is healthy and healed and able to make those good decisions, risk assessment, all of those impulse control things. Your red dog, on the other hand, is the lizard part of your brain, that inner limbic system, and it only knows how to survive. Its job is just to keep you alive. And the way it's wired is based on some of those biological things, including dopamine reception. So that addicted part of your brain really wants that next dopamine hit because dopamine is pleasure and pleasure is motivation and motivation towards that exact same thing again. So no matter how we get it. And so the red dog is patient. It's going to be waiting, right? You've already built those neural pathways in your brain, especially if you started sugar as a young child. It's a cunning dog. I mean, it doesn't like literally think, but it is thinking. There's regions of your brain are like, how can I get the sugar? How can I get the processed stuff? And it knows how to trick us into eating that drug of choice, whether we realize it or not. Oh, but they say that this is healthier. For me, like I don't eat a lot of fruit because if I sat down with grapes, like it would turn into a sugar fest. Like grapes are full of sugar and I could just eat the whole entire bag. But it's healthy sugar. Well, no, it's really not. For me, it's not a healthy thing. And so you have to um, keep your body from being tricked. The red dog is just waiting, right? One little slip and it comes back to life really full. It's like, who are you feeding? Are you feeding the blue dog? Are you making the right choices? Or are you feeding the red dog? So when it's talking to you, when you're feeling that angsty, when you're feeling that pull inside, when you're feeling that how do I justify getting my food? I'm in a sugar addicts group because of a book called Food Junkies by Dr. Vera Tarman. And in that group, a lot of people talk about like, but what about this? What about this? And I see them going online asking for other food junkies to justify for them why they can let their red dog win. You got to learn to recognize its voice because if you don't recognize its voice, then you're just going to trip up. And sometimes you're doing everything right and it just jumps up and it kicks you in the butt. Maybe you run into sugar and you didn't know you were running into sugar. Maybe you're going through an emotional trial and you let it in. Sometimes the addiction will get you. When that's happening, you need to reach out for help in those times. Shame is useless. Shame gets us nowhere. If you listen to Brene Brown, she'll talk to you about your authentic self and shame and how it destroys us. And really just letting shame win is not going to be helpful. So my final thoughts for this week, right? There's so many things to think about. I really want you to look at Dr. Vera Tarman. I want you to look at Bitten Jonsson. If you feel like you might have addiction issues, before I go any further, I really want you to reach out to somebody who can actually help you find a therapist. If you're in my regular group, we've got some actual therapists that are associated with my in-person class that can connect you with some people to help you with addiction issues. But if you don't know whether you're an addict or whether you're a harmful user, go to Bitten's website and she can give you some insights. One thing that all of us need to learn is what are our triggers? What are the things that make us more likely to fall into old habits? What is it? Who is it? Right? It could be sadly who it is. So there's situational triggers like, it's, oh, but it's Christmas. We should be able to eat all these things, or it's my birthday. Or you could get into a real argument with somebody and you feel like you need to go treat yourself because you deserve it. Those are situational triggers that might cause a problem. Food triggers are obviously there, right? If you eat this, it's not necessarily bad for you. Like for me, grapes, like I can't eat those grapes. Or my example I wrote here is like I started sugar-free Jello because I'm like, oh, I deserve a treat, and I tried it, and every single day I started craving the sugar-free Jello, and I wanted it every day, and I realized that this is just too sweet and too much for me, and it made me craving. And if I'm craving, then I will eventually give into the craving for a real sugar at some point, and so it's just not worth it for me. While the sugar-free didn't affect my blood sugar, it didn't affect my glucose levels, it did affect my brain, and that's real important to me. So you need to make plans to avoid those if possible, just to literally avoid them, or to have options, right? Like Kelly Hogan jokes about having purse bacon, having a bag with some pre-made bacon in your purse so that if you go to a party and you have a snack, or you eat before an event, right? So you're not so hungry when you get there and you're more likely to give in to temptation. Also, I recommend having a plan, maybe work it out with friends or whatever. What to say if somebody asks you why you're not eating or why you are eating X. I've had some people ask me, oh, you can't eat this. And I say, no, I can. I just choose not to. But there's some other things that you might have to say. It's really rude to ask people why they don't drink. Why is it not really rude to say, why aren't you eating sugar? Like, I mean, we've got a confused society. And finally, remember, you're not alone. You're not alone. Ask for help. There's somebody who can help you, even if it's somebody in Facebook land, somebody on the internet, they're going to help you. If you're in my in-person class or not, your homework this week is I want you to share your journey with one person. Find someone and talk to them about what you're going through. Somebody who's deep and can hear the deep heart thoughts that you have. Thanks for listening, and like and subscribe, share with your friends, and hopefully we'll make a difference together.